So I have started the recording. Again, it's just a couple minutes after, but I want to be super respectful of your time as we kick off SkillFest 2021. My name is Jessica Pettit. I'm super happy to be able to be with you today and attend some of the sessions throughout the day. And then I'm doing another session at the little bit later on unconscious bias. When we were talking about different things as far as topics this morning, what we ended up talking about was that this is a very interesting time, right? Whether we're talking about dealing with hybrid classrooms or sheltering in place, quarantine, politically speaking, also just kind of weather in general, right? Like, do we have electricity or water? How are things going in the world? There's a lot of things that are up. So we decided to focus on the concept that I wrote in my book that I call conversations that matter. And in order for today to really work or you to get the most out of it, what I'm going to ask you to do, this is your preface, and then we'll come back to it later. But I want you to think about conversations you've either had in the past or possibly conversations that you need to have in the future that make you a little nervous. Maybe they gave you heartburn. Maybe you are completely avoiding them. Maybe it's particular family members, at least in my family, the relatives that I try to avoid during holidays are the ones that always sit near the gravy boat. So then you have to choose between carbs and challenging conversations. Those folks. Some of you may be gifted unicorn fantasy amazing people and have all incredible relatives, which is great. That would be amazing. And that is not my case. But if you are able to think about either family members, coworkers, don't point your fingers because they may be on the call, coworkers, or if, again, everything's just kind of fantasy, magical, wonderful, then maybe it's also go to social media or people that are kind of following your accounts or accounts that you follow. And sometimes that's still not enough. There's somebody somewhere who has such a completely glittered life that they don't have any conversations that make them nervous or anybody in their life. Maybe they've weeded everybody out. I don't know. But you can also, if need be, even go to total strangers. And if you think about the people or types of people, or maybe even possibly not just types of people, but types of conversations or topics in conversations that make you a little bit more nervous. That's the kind of stuff that I want you to think about. You're not going to have to disclose any of that information. We're not going to role play or do anything like that at all. But in order for you to get the most out of this conversation, I want you to kind of focus on those pieces. Sometimes it's an individual student that we work with. Sometimes it's a type of student that we work with. Sometimes it's a topic. Sometimes it's a group. Sometimes it's an individual. It doesn't matter. But that is your main homework for the next hour and a half. And now that I've given you that, let me explain why, and then we're going to come back to it. So while you're thinking of the people or the topics or the situations that frustrate you the most, what I want you to be able to do is to understand why this is frustrating. Now, full disclosure, most common question I get is, have you met this person? They're annoying. They're wrong. How do I get them fixed? Because they're the problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and spoiler alert that. I have no idea how to fix them. I usually call them Todd or Barbara or something like that. And if it's helpful to have some kind of expert person tell you, they're wrong. You are completely right. Here, this is going to be recorded, so just take this clip. They're wrong. You're right. Does that make you feel better? Okay, now that we all feel better, can we get back to work? So what I mean by that is that what's going to be interesting is that even if I was able to fix that Todd or that Barbara, isn't there just going to be another Todd and another Barbara? The common denominator in all of the annoying Todds and Barbaras, and side note, if your name is Todd or Barbara, that doesn't make you any more annoying than anyone else. It's just a coincidence. But there will be replacement Todd and Barbaras. And so I noticed in my own work, I've been doing diversity, equity, inclusion work, primarily in higher education and some association work for about 25 years. I have exceptionally good skin. When at work, probably the first 10 years or so, I was doing what I would call very bad, ineffective diversity trainings. And I was having the conversation outside of myself so that I could have exposure or experiences and then role playing or kind of like showcasing what that role modeling, what that would look like for other people to have experiences or exposure that is different than themselves, whether it is culture or ethnicity or politics or religious beliefs or other kind of social identities, why that was important. And what I realized after about a decade of this is, number one, that is a very ineffective way of doing this work. Number two, it leads to burnout because you don't actually notice any kind of difference. And more importantly, it led to my burnout. And so while I was like, I got to figure out something else to do because this is not motivating me, them getting like no life glitter out of this. Why am I doing this? It's not working. It does lead to great t-shirts and bumper stickers, but it wasn't actually like leading to any change in the greater world, let alone with me and my relationships. So oftentimes in organizations or on campuses, we talk about recruitment and retention. And what's interesting is we focus on bringing in new stuff all the time, but very rarely do we pay attention to keeping what we already have or really benefiting from what we already have. And so I want us to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in a recruitment and retention kind of way, but not just on campus and not just about students or staff or employees, but about our lives and the people that we actually are engaging with. So back to my burnout. I was doing very bad diversity trainings for about 10 years and was crispy, crouton. Perhaps you can identify with feeling like a crouton where like French onion soup's not even going to cut it. Like you are toast, done, crispy, don't want to be here. There are probably people at your staff meetings that actually resemble croutons. Remember, don't point your fingers. It's rude. So I was at full-on crouton stage and I began to do a personal self-assessment and realized I have no other monetizable skills other than telling jokes and talking about topics that my grandmother told me you're never supposed to talk about. That is literally the only thing I know how to do. I do know how to fold a fitted sheet, which is soup's impressive to some people, but not monetizable. My landlord does not care how clean his linen closet looks, right? But it is a skill. And if you're interested, I'm happy to share it with you. So short of folding fitted sheets and telling jokes about topics that nobody wants to talk about, I had to figure out something to do. So when I realized I was at like peak crouton, I still had like contracts I needed to finish. Remember travel? I used to do that. So I would be traveling and I had like 4 or 5 more contracts I needed to finish while I was fully aware that I was in super crispy state. And what I started to do was to actually listen. Now, we all know that listening is very, very important and blah, blah, blah. And we like pretend to do it and it sounds great. We've been to a million workshops about the importance of like shutting your face and waiting for someone else to finish dribbling out words so that you can say what you need to say. And if it's Todd or Barbara, your patience is pretty thin about the dribbling of the words waiting bit. That's not what I mean by listening. What I mean by listening is that I was actually paying attention to the audience members who were asking me our questions, and they were coming up to me afterwards. They started paying attention. And what was interesting is that they all started talking about reasons why they were avoiding conversations that matter. They were giving me their perfectly logical explanations as to why they couldn't talk to their coworker, their partner, their spouse, their child, a neighbor, somebody like that. They can't do. You don't understand. How do I fix them? How do I fix them? How do I fix them? That was the theme. So as I started listening to them, what I realized is that there's actually a pattern in why we avoid conversations that matter. So I started getting kind of excited. And in case you haven't already figured this out, I am like a primo level dork. So when I start to notice that there's a pattern, I like immediately go to the library because we're going to like do some research. Let's figure this out. So I started doing all this research around why people avoid stuff that they know that they need to do, but they don't do it. So in doing this, there's a million different reasons, and we're not going to go into all of them, but like little buzzwords like perfectionism, imposter syndrome, trying to win, general hatred for other human beings, impatience, feeling like a fraud, not feeling good enough to be able to have these conversations, feeling stupider than your own kid. There's a lot of things that come up that you're like, I don't know how to have this conversation. I'm not going to have this conversation. But what's interesting is that your attention still knows that you need to have these conversations. So you just constantly have heartburn or like a puckery kind of feeling until you have the conversation. Then sometimes they start the conversation or you're forced to have the conversation, and then it's automatically not going to go well. You're entering defensively, they're entering defensively. Now it's like a word transaction thing, and you check it off like, well, that didn't go well, but at least it's done. I'm good for the month. And then you wait for the next cycle to go. So as I began listening to this and noticing these patterns and then doing my own research, what I realized is that conversations do matter. And the reason why conversations matter isn't because of the exchange of information. The reason why conversations matter at the heart is because it's about human connection. Now, it's a different workshop when we talk about how we value humans differently. We value individual humans differently. We value humans differently than we do plants and animals and inanimate objects. That is a different one. I married a philosopher. I'm happy to talk to you about this. But what I mean is your chosen people, your chosen crew. Don't worry about the ones that you're not choosing, but the ones that you are choosing. Is there a way that you can increase the amount of connection in the world so that we can actually like restore humanity, restore a sense of humanity about other people and about ourselves? Now, obviously, this is a professional development event. And so some people are going to talk about, what do we mean by restoring humanity? Do we mean like human resources? Do we mean emotional intelligence? Do we mean recruitment and retention of students or staff members or employees or coworkers? Yes, across the board. So sometimes when we start talking about the idea of restoring humanity, we forget that all of those people actually are human beings. Most importantly, we forget that we are also one of these human beings. We also need connection. Now, there's a lot of research right now, especially post-COVID, talking about human connection and how, like, when we Zoom all day long, the faces are so much closer to our face. It's like having regular, intimate conversations in bright light on a crowded subway. So our brains and our hearts and our emotions and our relationships and our community is kind of in a weird space right now. But what is fascinating to me is that conversations still matter, and our ability to have a genuine connection still matters. So can we do something, I'm going to say in an hour and a half, where you can actually pick the most frustrating people, the most frustrating topics, and actually have some skills on how to have those conversations because they matter? And spoiler alert, yes, we can. That's what we're going to do this morning. But in order to do that, I need you to kind of understand two fundamental things. Number one, them being wrong and you being right might feel good in half a millisecond, but that doesn't actually restore humanity or a connection. But sure, you're right, they're wrong. The other thing is that ultimately you are only responsible for yourself. That sounds great, right? Because you don't have to be responsible for Todd or Barbara. But then when we start thinking about it, most of us would rather be responsible for Todd or Barbara, because being self-reflective and self-aware enough to be responsible for 100% of this hot mess pudding, that is a very big ask. Can I go back to being responsible for Todd and Barbara? No, you can't. That's the trade-off. So if you're going to be responsible for yourself, I'm going to show you how to do that. But can we actually focus on who and how we are in the world and be responsible for that? The outcome of all the research that I did, I wrote a book called Good Enough Now, And the mantra is particularly important. So some of you are going to want to write this down. The mantra is, do the best you can with what you got some of the time. I'll repeat it. Do the best you can with what you got some of the time. If that sounds like a low bar, you're right. Yeah, do the best you can. Doesn't mean be perfect with what you already have. Doesn't mean you're going to need some certification or additional class or Tennessee Williams glass menagerie collection of all these different people and experiences in your life, and then you get to be a good person. Just work with what you already got right now. Some of you, including me, it's pretty scary. We're disasters, but you can still do the best you can with what you already got, no matter what level of personal disaster you might be. Then, do you do this 24/7? Unlikely. Please come back and ask again. We don't do anything 24/7. Some of us say like breathing or blinking or things like that. But like when it comes down to it, I am a terrible breather. So I don't even know that I'm nailing breathing 24/7. So let's just like lower that bar. Let's do the best we can with what we got some of the time. And if we're aiming for some of the time, overachievers, go nuts. You could do half the time. That would be more, right? But trying to do something that is uncomfortable, that is new, that is not a habit, that is not a routine, that is like staring into the sun of self-reflection and responsibility 100% of the time, I guarantee you is how you will probably not even start this. So again, lower the bar. Do the best you can with what you got some of the time. Now, let me show you why. When I was listening to those audience members and I started actually doing my research to try to figure out what is going on and what's happening and what are these patterns and why are these audience member comments like coming in so consistently, what I realized is that I was creating a model. And the model is based on 3 variables. I know it's early, so this is not very fancy, but the 3 variables are in all of us. So this is not a horoscope thing where you have to pick one. So there's head, heart, and action. Head does not mean smart, pressure off. It just means super detail oriented. Heart does not mean emotions. According to my therapist, those are logical reactions. I'm still working on that. The heart in this case means like big ideas or big concepts. And then action does not mean exercise. What action means is that you're doing or you're not doing. So there, like, think about people you know who own pickups and multiple sized ladders. They don't want to sit in a meeting about what they could do. They want to know what to pick up and where to put it back down. But action is also paralysis, like blue screens, spinning rainbow ball of death, because inaction is also an action. So if you have head, heart, and action, those 3 variables are in all of us. But what happens is our life has taught us usually a combo of 2 of the variables is the like clutch way to show up. That's where we feel comfortable. So when we're challenged or defensive or change is happening or something, our life has taught us how we are going to feel the most safe and prepared. And we lean in to how we feel most safe and prepared because we feel the most safe and prepared. But that doesn't mean that's how everybody else reacts. So let me show you. Okay, head, heart, action. Let me interrupt again. Have any of you, you don't have to put it in the chat, you can just raise your hand or just like nod accordingly. But have any of you ever heard that you are never, ever, 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 ever supposed to make judgments and assumptions? Have you heard this? What happens when we assume things about one another? I know, a spelling pop quiz in the morning. Any idea what happens when we assume one thing or another? It's a spelling joke. Nothing like a good spelling joke to kick this off. The reason why I think this is so important is that and possibly I learned this at good white lady school. I don't know, because it's hard to separate out what is Jessica and what is like good liberal white lady trying to not be a jerk person. It's hard to know. But I was told that you're never supposed to make judgments and assumptions because it makes you a terrible person. Well, I don't want to be a terrible person. You mean like chutes and ladders, slippery slope, the way to not be a terrible person is to never make judgments and assumptions? Oh, well, I will just be difference blind. I'll be colorblind. I won't notice any of these details about anybody else. I'll never make a judgment and assumption about another human being ever. I will show up as a clean slate, and everyone I interact with, they will also be a clean slate. And then we will have an authentic and vulnerable conversation with one another where we'll get to know everybody, and it's going to be amazing. Doesn't that sound great? Like on Instagram, that might work, except I got like shit to do. I don't have time to be that authentic all the time. I got like emails to do and things to text and chais to drink. Like, no. It might sound good, but it is not a functional way of expecting your interactions with other human beings. So let's just take sounds good or ideal or like those Instagrammy things that are like the gold foil, like calligraphy things. That would be amazing. But have you seen my life? I'm not amazing. So what can I do in reality that's not waiting until I'm honest or waiting until I'm amazing or waiting until I'm perfect? Because in the meantime, while I'm on that steep learning curve, people are in pain. And sometimes I'm causing that pain and I don't even know about it. We have real work we need to do and real conversations that matter. So what can we do in the meantime? This isn't about erasing or amputating or reformatting a hard drive. It's about actually dealing with how you actually show up in the real moment, which again, some of us are like, can I go back to babysitting Todd and Barbara? That sounds way better. It does sound better, except it's ineffective. So here's what I learned. Instead of trying to never, ever make judgments and assumptions, what would happen if we just take responsibility for the ones that we make? Our life has taught us how to feel safe and prepared. That does not mean that we're accurate, but it does mean that we are going to show up slightly more prepared and slightly feeling safer as we navigate a new person, a new phone call, an email. We'll figure out what to wear. We'll figure out what kind of language to use, because our life has taught us a certain way of making judgments and assumptions. And that certain way of making judgments and assumptions is how we show up. Now, we could be responsible for those habits or those patterns, and then we can keep the ones that we really like. We can keep the ones that make us feel outrageously safe and prepared. And then we can edit the rest of them. That's what I mean. Now, when I say safe and prepared in itself, those are very triggering words for people. And generally, safe doesn't always mean not life-threatening. What safe really means is like comfortable. All right, I got this. Like, I know how to do this. Oh, I have a cable package. I know what this means. I feel better now. I know this vocabulary word, right? Prepared means that you've kind of adjusted and thought about what it is that you're going to do. Even preparing for this Zoom conference all day long. Like some of you like read my bio, or you like maybe stalked me online. Some of y'all, you just lucky to be in the right Zoom link at the right time. It's fine. So depending on how much preparation you did, you had to decide, what are you going to do to like feel okay Zooming at a conference all day? Are you using a virtual background? Is your camera off? What kind of shirt are you going to wear? None of us care what kind of pants you're wearing, right? Unless you stand up and your camera's on. Please have pants on, right? But there's some like preparation safety kind of situation that happens. So when I was doing my research about the model, head, heart, and action, what I realized is that first off, diversity trainings are constantly teaching us to never make judgments and assumptions, which is absurd because we make judgments and assumptions all of the time. Have you ever shown up to a place where you're not wearing the right kind of outfit? Now, some of you are like, I don't really care about clothes, but I was invited to a party once. And I was very excited, and I had this amazing red polka dot dress. Of course it was red, and of course it was polka dots, and it was incredible and not subtle at all. Did anyone want to tell me that it was awake? Not awake, awake, meaning somebody had died, and it was a party about the dead person. The dead person died of chickenpox. I'm wearing a red polka dotted dress. Anyone want to be me in that moment? No one wants to be me in that moment. Luckily, I have a personality and figured out how to get out of the room as quickly as possible. I was not prepared. I did not feel safe. And by safe, I mean radically uncomfortable, even though I looked super cute in that dress. That can be a metaphor for every conversation that you're a little nervous about having. You're trying to figure out how to have the conversation. You're trying to figure out how to deal with this topic. You're trying to figure out how to deal with that person again, because it's been so unsuccessful every single time you've ever connected with them. So armor up, you're going to have that conversation and get out of there as quickly as possible. We make judgments and assumptions so that we feel safe and prepared. That has nothing to do with the other person, and we might not be accurate. So how do we take responsibility for what makes us feel safe and prepared, even when we know it might not be accurate? This is every single time we engage with a phone call, a text message, an email, a student, a staff member, or a total stranger. So as I began to do this research, again, head, heart, and action are in all of us, but our lives have taught us that there's really kind of one habitual way of being. Now, of course, I have to disagree with my own research. If you are like an emotionally intelligent person, you have higher emotional intelligence, it's going to be a lot easier for you to navigate or switch based on who you're talking to. But most of us, for the most part, are pretty lazy, and we're very comfortable in our habits. So yes, there is an out. I am certain somebody's going to put in the chat and be like, actually, when you start with actually, I already know what you're going to say. And yes, you are correct. You are far more evolved than everyone else. So if you don't mind, just hold, please. I'm going to go talk to everyone else, and then we'll be right back, and then you get to teach the class. Sound good? In the meantime, what ends up happening is most of us show up with two variables pretty consistently. And most importantly, pretty consistently when we are mad, when we are defensive, when we are frustrated, when we're navel gazing, when we're in paralysis analysis and we don't even know what to do with our lives or ourselves, when we're like, we are probably showing up in similar ways. So what I want you to do is to think again, I told you earlier, but I want you to think about the most frustrating people that you can that you have to deal with, whether you like them or not. Some of you birthed them, and I get it. Some of you are married to them. I get it. Some of you are currently sitting 6 feet away in a different room with them. Don't point your fingers. Do not use names. Do not put it in the chat. Just picture the people who are frustrating. The reason why they are frustrating is because they're showing up in a different way. That's it. So let me explain. So I'm going to start first with head action. I am a head action person. So here's what's annoying about head action people. If I am describing you, for the record, you're welcome to out yourself, but don't out other people. So a head action person, we're terrible. We are basically egomaniac party of ones. What I mean by this is let's say that at work, we have to collaborate with someone else. We don't like to collaborate because if you would just let it go my way, just leave me alone. I got this. It would be fine and it would be done correctly and it would be done ahead of time. But no, you want me to community build with the new person. So I have to collaborate. So then what this looks like is that I'm going to make a to-do list, but I'm going to take everything off of the to-do list that I want to do so that the only thing left are the tasks that maybe you could do. I'm going to lie about the deadline because I don't trust you and I'm going to have to redo all your work anyway. That is actually not called collaboration. That's not even called delegation, but it is a head action response to when you're uncomfortable because you have to share or like actually build a community with someone else. So this person is very annoying. That is me. Hi, nice to meet you. I am a classic head action person. And what's fun is that because I do diversity stuff, I'm going to actually showcase social justice leaders. Gandhi is also a head action person. Now, rumor has it, Gandhi did some good stuff. Gandhi was also very frustrating to work with. I've done a ton of archival research and read their journals and their letters and everything. What is fascinating is Gandhi literally thought his own individual hunger strike would overthrow an entire government. And where technically speaking, the government was eventually overthrown, it was not because of his individual hunger strike, but he's not going to give credit to anybody else. Gandhi was also a first-generation college student who basically flunked out of college, got into law school by a typo, and was such a horrible, terrible lawyer. Lawyers asked him to stop practicing law. How bad do you have to be for other lawyers to be like, have you tried door-to-door sales? You should try something else. Gandhi was awful. Now, if you show up in a head action way, perhaps you can identify with Gandhi. Gandhi still did good stuff and was also very annoying. If you're not the head action person, you're probably frustrated by somebody like me or Gandhi because we're really frustrating people. But what's fascinating is that in reading about Gandhi, his work became significantly more impactful when he discovered compassion. Now, remember, head is details, action is the doing something, and the heart is not emotions. But in his sense, the concept of compassion meant that his work was going to impact people that weren't even born yet, that he'll never meet. His work would last forever, generations after him. So he brought the head action piece, stumbled into the heart piece, and that's when he was able to show up in his trifecta with all three, and his work was what I call unstoppable. So your head action-y folks that you're frustrated by, or you happen to be one, what you're missing is, why are you doing this work? If someone is really frustrating in your life, maybe they need to be reminded that they are part of a larger community, or that their work actually matters bigger than them. And it's not just pushing paper and spreadsheets, even though pushing paper and spreadsheets is kind of like porn for us. We're very excited about spreadsheets. But if you can tell me why I'm making all these spreadsheets, or that people appreciate the work that I'm doing because it's connected to something larger, then you're going to be able to have a conversation that matters, even with the annoying head action people. Now, heart action people, I don't want to leave you out because you are like, oh, spreadsheets, I make them colors. What happens with heart action people, or what's annoying about you, is that you tend to have ideas. And by ideas, you mean you have a lot of ideas. Heaven forbid you go to a conference because you're going to come home with a new idea that might actually contradict the last idea, like a new assessment tool. Ooh, you're going to implement the new assessment tool before the last assessment tool even got finished. You are the sparkly butterfly, my friend. You have tons of ideas. You are not limited by gravity, budgets, staff, time, to-do lists. Oh no, it's just idea time. Heart action people are also completely dependent on people scurrying behind them, because the people scurrying behind them with clipboards who are like, what the hell did she say this time? That person is the one who's actually going to implement the idea that you have, which is why you're not limited by like details or factoids, because you don't actually end up having to implement it. Somebody else does. Heart action people tend to be kind of leadery people, chairs, departments, director, executive director kind of people, because they're the visionaries, which also means people are plotting your death because you're super frustrating, because you cannot actually maintain an entire list all the way to the end because you're going to interrupt the list that you likely made. A heart action person is annoying, and they also can do great things. Literally, the social justice hero here is Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King had a dream, not a plan. And because of how karma works, the part of the I have a dream speech that we all remember was a 40-minute riff that wasn't planned, that was over 3 other people's speaking slots. So historically, what ends up happening is that particular event gets critiqued because it didn't have any women speak at it. It would have if Martin Luther King had shut his face on time, but he didn't shut his face on time. And then what's the part of the speech we like teach children in school? The 40-minute riff. He had a dream, not a plan. That's great. But luckily, he has a staff, so he was able to figure stuff out. Now, what is important to notice, and this is, I'm going back to head action for just a second. Gandhi and Martin Luther King were both assassinated. Some of you don't know your history, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that in there. Now, what is fascinating is that Martin Luther King was assassinated by like people who were challenged by his work. Okay, so Martin Luther King actually would say, here's his head part showing up. He had a PhD and was an ordained minister before he turned 40, which are systems, right? So he's trying to lean into that head part. He said that his work became more threatening, and he actually predicted his own assassination from his enemy when his work pivoted from being straight Black Christian men and straight white Christian men being equal to actually expanding his work connected to an economic system. When he started working towards a living wage, which PS we're still fighting for, but when he started working towards a living wage, that's when his work became threatening. And he was able to show up in his trifecta, and he in fact was assassinated by his enemy. Now, the reason why I need to say that is that Gandhi, head action over here, Gandhi was assassinated by his own people. So if you think that, oh, I got spreadsheets out, to be assassinated by your own people means you're that annoying. So if you are a head action person, please look around, because you're not necessarily safe. You're going to have to take responsibility for yourself at some point. Okay. Now, I like to pause at head action and heart action, because the vast majority of my consulting work is these two people look like they are miscommunicating, but they might be communicating about the same subject. They're just responding in very different ways. So that's okay. I now have a mortgage to pay. So y'all just keep having conflict, but you're on the same page. You just hire an outsider to come in and mediate the conversation. But the reason why it's important to mention is that most folks, and notice they have the action variable in common, is they're trying to do stuff, or they're trying not to do stuff very quickly, maybe with all the information, maybe not with all the information, but it looks like they're in conflict. Now, Gandhi and Martin Luther King arguably did good stuff. They have stamps. Some of you don't know what that is. Google it. But they did good stuff. But that doesn't mean that they were not frustrating to work with. So if you or the people that you're frustrated by identify somehow with these kind of things, that makes sense. Now, it is always important to mention somebody somewhere is literally saying to themselves right now, I don't know how this crazy blue-haired lady thinks I'm supposed to diagnose myself with all these jokes and all this laughing bits. I need more information. I mean, this is a serious thing. I can't just diagnose myself as head action or heart action. I need way more information. You, my friend, are head heart. And that is how I sell books, because you're going to want to read my book to understand what's going on and what's happening, and you need more information. If you're interested, you can go and take a little 13-question survey at goodenoughnow.com/survey. Those of you with high action, you're already multitasking. So just open another tab and go to goodenoughnow.com/survey. It's fun. There's questions about puppies and taco trucks and Dolly Parton. And it'll kind of diagnose you as to which variable you're showing up with the most right now, because I need to have a conversation with everyone else who's like, I don't know. I mean, do you mean at work? Do you mean at home? Like maybe I have that emotional intelligence stuff. How am I supposed to pick one variable? I need to talk to them real quick. So y'all go entertain yourself with the survey. Let me talk to everybody else. Head heart people. I married one of you. So that is ultimate karma. So let me explain to you why I know so confidently that you are a head heart person. Number one, heaven forbid you make a quick decision. You are not the people that I go to at the top of lunch and ask, where do you want to go to lunch? Because the lunch hour is ticking away. And Barbara is going to be like, oh, I don't know. And you're going to have to go to Yelp, or you're going to open a drawer with every takeout menu that's ever existed that could possibly be a lunch option. I'm hungry and I'm getting impatient. So I'm going to be like, narrow it down, Barbara. Let's go to tacos. Oh, well, now we have a section. There's a whole file folder on tacos. So we got to figure out, remember this one when we went to Muriel's birthday party there? Head heart. They get stuck in spin cycle. They're not ones to make very quick decisions. These are not your crisis manager kind of people, but they are the people who can get the copy machine fixed after midnight on a federal holiday because they know somebody. They are the mavens and the gatherers of all of the information of every subject that could ever They are your lifeline. If you are on a game show, you're going to call a head heart person, but you're not going to ask a head heart person like, where the fire extinguisher is, because what do you mean by fire extinguisher? This is what happens. In my particular marriage, perhaps I'm going to save someone a copay right now, but in my marriage, I used to travel about 300 days a year before this sheltering in place thing. Now, my philosopher introvert husband is sheltering in place in 1,200 square feet with a flaming extrovert who has not been on a plane since March 6th. That is a year from tomorrow. Please send him help. Anyway, I used to come home and he would give me a kayak update. Now, I live in super Northern California where there are 6 rivers that dump into a bay, and then the bay goes into the ocean. So to buy some kind of water vessel is evidently a more complicated situation than just go buy a kayak, because there's fresh water, there's brackish, which is some kind of mixing. I'm an avid indoorsman, some kind of mixy, salty, fresh situation, then the bay, then the ocean. So what kind of kayak do I want? Do I want a toppy or sit in? Do I want a 2-person kayak? Hard no. So just a 1-person kayak. Got it. So 6 years pass of kayak research. 6 years. So finally, I'd had it. I came home. Now, at the end of the 6 years, there, of course, is a binder, not full of women, but full of kayaks. And there's all different kinds of kayaks and price points and colors and recycling. And ideally, he would like a reused one because it's better for the environment. He prefers red. Then he went on this long tangent about what colors would be like scary to sharks or something. I have no idea. Don't think I actually listened. But 6 years in, I get the new kayak report and I'm like, get in the car. And we go to the one store in town that magically has his dream kayak in red that had just been exchanged for a new kayak leaning against the door on sale. So he doesn't even notice how close to death he is because we just buy the kayak. Now, he could have been kayaking those 6 years, but at least now he's actually kayaking. And thank goodness for COVID that he has a kayak, because now I can wake up and be like, don't you think you should go to the water today? Get out of the house. Okay, so kayaks, head, heart people. Let's focus. Thank you for the copay share right there. What is amazing about head, heart people is that they will do all the research and they will find it all out, but they are not going to do it quickly. And asking a head heart person to do something quickly is actually going to get them more head hearty than less head hearty, because that's their comfort zone. That's where they feel safe. That's where they feel prepared, is they need all of the information. There is no such thing as overthinking, because there's always another facet to which think about. The head heart people are annoying. It's true, but they're not any more annoying than the heart action or the head action people. You just need to be able to identify these folks or recognize that you are one of them. So if head, heart are the variables you show up with, then action is the piece that you need to figure it out. So researching feels like action. Waiting until you get enough information feels like action, until eventually you're ready to actually act, actually respond. This social justice hero is Mother Teresa. Rumor has it she did some great stuff. She even also has a stamp. She was also incredibly frustrating to work with for obvious reasons. She was stuck in spin cycle. Literally, to inform her choices, she was in a debate of whether or not it was her God's will to have this much suffering on the planet, or if it was God's will for her to intervene. How is she supposed to know that answer? She doesn't know that answer. Is she going to be able to pick which taco truck to go to for lunch? No, she is debating much bigger things. But eventually, Mother Teresa realized that she could build a school. She had resources and access to building a school, which is how her work started, that we now know her because of. Now, Mother Teresa was not assassinated. I am a conspiracy theorist, but she died seemingly of natural causes. But I do think it's important to mention that if social justice heroes, who we remember doing amazing, great things, but even in their own journals and their own letters, know that they're annoying and knew that they were frustrating, and the people around them would all kinds of gossip about how frustrating they are to work with, those folks can be frustrating and do good work. Spoiler alert, so can you. So can they. The people that you thought of, your super frustrating people, right? They do good work too. They're just showing up in a different way. Okay, so let's just pretend that this is a true statement. Head, heart people need some kind of suspension of disbelief because they haven't read the book yet. So let's just pretend that we're going to operate this way. If we could show up in our trifecta, we would be completely unstoppable. But the vast majority of the time, we are showing up out of comfort and habit with one, likely two variables. And if we can take responsibility for how we're showing up, then we know where we're starting to then engage with someone else where maybe we could figure out how they're showing up. Now, I had this great epiphany and then got super intimidated because I felt like I needed to like write a model or do research or write a book or something. I got super intimidated. So I decided to read a bunch of books about conversations because surely this isn't a new idea. And then I don't have to write a book because I have all kinds of imposter syndrome and fraud kind of situations. Okay, so I'm a fraud. No, I've just been fired. There's a difference. I have a therapist, don't worry. So in doing my own kind of like prep work, I read Crucial Conversations, Courageous Conversations, Fierce Conversations, and Difficult Conversations. 4 great books, highly recommend them. But what was fascinating about those books is that it really was kind of centered around the sender and the receiver, the sender and the receiver, the sender and the receiver of a conversation. And that felt really weird to me. And I think why it felt weird to me is that ultimately, as a diversity person or a diversity, equity, inclusion educator or trainer, I don't believe our connections across humanity always are A-B transactions. There are also bystanders. There are also other people who are impacted by that conversation who may not have been part of the conversation. There's also the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting that are impacted by what happened in the meeting. There's also different kind of group membership and individual responsibility. So it didn't feel right that it was so A, B, sender, receiver. And to be frank, it kind of felt Jedi skill-ish that if you got this right, you could get a car for a cheaper price. And I didn't want to do that. Now I'm full circle back to having to write a book. And so what I realized is that I wanted to write a book that isn't about me getting somebody else to do what I want them to do. But what I wanted to do was to get me to do what I wanted to do some of the time. And if I can be responsible for myself some of the time, then I can be reflective of myself some of the time. Then and only then could I have a conversation that matters. And that flip, that inside out piece is where I went from kind of outside in to inside out. So instead of it being a collection of vocabulary, words, experiences, and people different than me, what it became is, how has my life taught me to be the way that I am? What of my life lessons do I feel like I need to keep? And what of my life lessons are available for editing? What of my life exposure or lack thereof? What if I survived? What pain and suffering is real for me that is teaching me how to show up into the future? And as soon as I flipped that inside out, what happened is I created the opportunity for an invitation. Instead of a scolding, it was a moment where we might be able to connect as human beings. Now, remember the mantra is do the best you can with what you got some of the time. I don't know that this is 100% effective, but I know that it takes into consideration healing, self-care, and the idea of restoring humanity to people. So that's kind of what I want to focus on. If you can identify kind of how you're likely showing up and the people who frustrate you, and you now can kind of understand maybe there's something good about them. There's also something terribly annoying. Remember, you're right, they're wrong. But what could we do from that place? What invitation exists from that foundation? And all of a sudden, it seemed to be so radically different. I started showing up to conversations in a different way. I started listening to conversations in a different way. And with that, I think we're going to be able to actually do some real work. So before I get to that piece, I want to toss it out to y'all and pause. I know there's been some people who had their hands up, etc., but I want to see if there's any thoughts or comments or questions. You're welcome to put them into the chat, or you can text message me because you may have thoughts and questions after today, but you're welcome to save a text messaging number. But the text messaging number is 202-670-4262. Feel free to text any kind of questions or comments or thoughts. I put the number in the chat as well. 202-670-4262. But while we're kind of waiting to see if anything comes in over chat or text, just want to do a little checkity check. How you doing out there? How's it going? Thoughts, comments, questions so far? Does anybody want to out themselves as a classic head action, heart action, or head heart person? This is a great time to apologize for being a jerk. Anybody want to do anything? People are taking the survey. Excellent.
Hello, my name is Erin, and I did take the quiz real quick, and I'm an action thought person.
And the first person to break the ice. Very good job. See how that
I guess
works?
that's classic. Okay.
Welcome. Great. Any other thoughts, comments, anything? Thank you for breaking the ice. Anyone else? Anyone else? People are identifying themselves based on the survey. I always think it's funny when people say, well, according to the survey, I'm blah, 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 because they almost always have a head because they're like, I don't know. And did you see the typo in question number 8? I'll have to email her about that. It's in there for your entertainment, I promise. Wonderful. Okay, great. Let's see. Oh, I do have a text. Our results here were head, and the last question, they thought they were going to be heart. Okay, good job. Thank you for texting. Great. Well, again, you can save that texting number. My job is to be thought-provoking, which means later on tonight when you're making dinner, you're going to be like, I have a question. That is totally fine. And you can text message me then too. Or if you're watching the recording, feel free to send a text message, 202-670-4262. And being allergic to surveys is totally fine. Here's the catch-ola though. When you did the survey and you get emailed the stuff, I think it automatically asks you. I do not automatically subscribe you because that is a gross move, but I think you get asked if you want to join my monthly newsletter. My monthly newsletter, the first email you get is a YouTube video of how to fold a fitted sheet. Don't say that I don't deliver. You're welcome. And if you're like, no, Al's like, I'm allergic to surveys and newsletters, you can also go to YouTube and look up Jess Pettit folding fitted sheet. It's to Star Wars. It's worth it. Anyway, okay. So if we keep on going, that sounds great. The link again. Oh, now people are excited about taking the survey because they're like, oh, I didn't do it before, but now I guess I will. goodenoughnow.com/survey is the link to the survey again. And then I'm going to add a handout in here if my computer will cooperate, which was kind of questionable earlier. So let's not put pressure on it. The next piece, some people like a good handout. I just sang that to like the State Farm jingle. Did y'all get that? Like a good handout, State Farm is there. This is brought to you by my ADHD that is unmedicated as a classic Gen Xer. You're welcome. Okay, so there is a handout that I just put into the chat. You are welcome to download. You do not have to download. Those of you that are multitasking, don't worry, I'm gonna go over it. And those of you on your phone, you don't even get access to them. So don't worry about it. But just in case, page 192 of my book is a flowchart. I would like to first point out that this flowchart is not linear. It is actually a circle, which means you never finish. So if you're not interested in things you never finish, like sweeping or laundry or something, then don't download it. But when we start talking about having a conversation that matters, I think that it's a really important piece for you to be able to understand what you need to be able to do. The reason why is we all have a conversation that makes us super nervous. We all have staffs that are chock full of the same type of people because we tend to hire the same type of people. We all have organizations or committees or something like this that we are failing miserably at recognizing the importance of actually the good work that people different than us can do. Now, whether I'm talking about social identities or I'm talking about which head, heart, action variable kind of situation they show up, it's a Trojan horse method to have a larger conversation because When I come into an organization, one of the first things that I do, oh, and I got a question about this too, so this is kind of great. So if I come into an organization and let's say that they're actually hiring someone. Now, this might be too soon to talk about this, but let's just hypothetically talk about when there's not hiring freezes. So if there is a search committee, what ends up happening is somebody's boss somewhere has an easy yes. And they will ask someone to chair a search committee because they know they're going to get an easy yes, because very few people is it their like dying wish to chair a search committee. So somebody's going to have to do this. All right, great. So then they're going to go and look at all their friends for their easy yeses and where they have social capital built up and pull together a search committee of people they want to spend extra time with, because they're not going to ask Todd or Barbara. They're going to ask people that they want to hang out with because they have to do this extra asterisk other duties assigned thing in the first place. So the first thing I do when I come in is release everybody from that committee. You don't have to do this. This is also how I get very popular points. So you are no longer on this committee. I then interview everybody and find the strongest head action, the strongest heart action, and the strongest head heart person. And I ask the three of them to be on the search committee. Now, I know I'm on the right track, especially in person, because when you show up in a room, they're sitting there like this, like, who are these people? I don't know. Do you work here? Who are you? I don't know you. What department are you in? What is happening? That's when you know you did good. You did good, because they do not naturally gravitate to each other. They don't know each other, but that's going to be fantastic, because if you can get three different people looking at the same pile of resumes and actually from consensus develop the strongest candidate base, then you're actually going to have a much stronger pool to interview from. And heaven forbid somebody actually accept the job. They are now going to have multiple people to connect to instead of just one group that they're exactly like, which is not only good for recruitment, it is also good for retention. So I'm starting to get the questions, which are very heady questions, of can somebody be in between different variables? Can you have too much of one variable, too much of it? This is not cooking. So there's no like tablespoons or cups or ounces required. I do not know how to cook. So I think what I just used were cooking words. So this is not, all three variables are in all of us. And our life has taught us usually which two make us feel the most safe and prepared. It doesn't mean it's accurate, and it doesn't mean that it's appropriate. It just means we feel safe and prepared. But all three variables are in all of us at any time, and you can flip and flop between them. I actually am very curious. My parents were not never divorced. They died when I was young, but they never divorced. But I have a number of friends who have had divorced at a young age in their parents. So they had multiple households that they had to navigate. And I'm developing a theory that the more that might be true, the more your emotional intelligence is up. I would say the same thing for people who have visible, subordinated, or marginalized identities. You are constantly navigating every single space, whether you are driving or walking down the sidewalk or trying to work in this office, and then you have to go to this office, but this is where you work. You have to navigate those spaces and shift and cover and figure out how it is that you're going to show up in that given moment. Your emotional intelligence is probably significantly higher than somebody who really just has to pick an outfit to wear for a day, right? Because this is how I show up. This is it, right? So then we don't have to shift or adjust that much. So the higher that experience is, the more likely you are to be able to flip in between the different variables and how you show up. Can you also change from one into the other group as you mature and grow? Sure, you can change, and you can also devolve, right? Like when we start making fun of people about midlife crises, that's not a maturity thing. That's actually a regression thing. We go back and forth. It depends. I've been sober for about 18 years. And I think that when I first got sober, that might have been like a high point. And then across the 18 years, there have been different points where it has been more challenging or not challenging to stay sober. And I think that that also impacts my ability of how I show up, how I feel safe, how I feel prepared, what's going on, what's not going on, what room am I in, what has just happened. So it ebb and flows constantly. It is not a static situation, but that also means the person that you're frustrated by or the person you're trying to engage in a conversation, they're also not static. So notice a lot of the questions are like, what about me? What about me? What about me? Conveniently, we're basically all narcissists. So use that skill to be responsible for yourself. But notice the people that you're frustrated by. The reason why you're frustrated by them is you have decided how they are. And that is how they're going to be. And you are now asking them, whether you know it or not, to stay in this frustrating role so that you feel safe and prepared, because now you know how to deal with them in frustrating role. So when they change or ebb or flow, or heaven forbid, you actually realize you weren't accurate and you're going to have to start changing things, this is when we're actually connecting with a human being. Like, great example is there's an individual whose name I'm not going to name. Let's call him Jeff, largely because his name is Jeff. But he's not really somebody I would ever want to be in an elevator with. Specifically, I think women, you understand what I mean? Like alone in a place with no cameras. He's a little, I think the word is handsy, right? Well, I'm not a big fan of this guy. Nope, not alone. Will not be alone in a room with this individual. That is totally fine. Am I right? I don't know. Do I feel safe? Sure do. Okay. Sometimes you just have to trust the hairs on the back of your neck, right? So one day I'm at a conference and around the corner, somebody is on the phone and they are clearly talking to a grandchild. They're using little baby voices. They're telling funny stories. They are using funny accents, etc. And I'm like, whoever that is having the time of their life. This is great. I turn the corner and it's Jeff. So Jeff, the person who I've written a story about that I will not be alone with, is like being an adorable grandpa. That doesn't make the first story wrong. It just means that I wasn't prepared for the second story. Make sense? That I'm responsible for providing space. I'm responsible for providing space of the other people. My need to feel safe and prepared means I'm going to put everybody as quickly as possible into a little box so that I know exactly how to deal with them. And I don't care if I'm accurate because I'm being prepared and safe. The idea is to recognize you might not be accurate. So the language that I like to use is called leave room for edits. It is not about never making judgments and assumptions. It's about recognizing that you do, and then figuring out what are you going to do with them. If we write a story about each other so that we feel safe. I used to work in student affairs and my whole day was 15-minute meetings, which meant I had about 10 minutes with whatever student was coming into my office to size them up, figure out what they needed, get it done, and get them out so that I had 5 minutes to do that paperwork before the next one came in. This is not very customer service friendly, but I got super good at it. Because even like how they entered the room, the story already started. So what I'm encouraging us to do is not to never write a story, because you do need to feel safe and prepared, especially in that kind of meeting system. One of my favorite social justice quotes is Francis Kendall. Every system is exquisitely designed to produce the results it gets. So I'm supposed to have one-on-one student meetings every 15 minutes while making personalized connections with each of them, where I can't do very much in 15 minutes, but I certainly got good at doing it in 10, right? That doesn't make any sense, but that is the exquisitely designed system. I digress. There's a reason I'm self-employed now. Anyway, when you write that story, you feel safe and prepared with that story. What I'm asking is that you write that story, but print it out triple space with extra wide margins. And then with generosity and curiosity, hand it to someone else and seek their edits. Actively be vulnerable enough and authentic enough to find out about them, what their edits are of the story draft that you did so you feel safe and prepared. Ultimately, that is what an actual connection is. That's where you can actually restore humanity with one another and not just converse or transact information, but actually get to know one another. When I wrote my book, I sent a draft to 20 of my friends, and I hoped it would come back just bleeding and gutted, and luckily it did. So then the book got better, right? Why can't I do this more regularly when I'm engaging with someone else? I believe that if we make a conscious effort to do the best we can with what we got, some of the time, we will be able to do this more often. We just have to consciously decide we're going to practice. So if you got the handout out of the chat, this is what we're going to focus on, is what I mean by practice, because I want to make sure that you have a really solid takeaway, because at the beginning of this, you pictured a conversation that you were nervous about having, or that you're frustrated that you even have to have, or you've been putting off, etc. That conversation might be a text, it might be an email, it might be in person, it might be in your household, it might be in your office, I don't care. But I want you to engage, because not engaging is still taking all of your energy. So what if you took some of that energy to actually engage? So before we can do this, there's one pattern that almost always happens that I have to call out and get rid of. First one is, you do not have to have a conversation with someone that is endangering you. You do not have to start big, right? I do not understand I love politics. I'm obsessed with politics, but I cannot wrap my brain around Dick Cheney. Well, likely of me being alone with a one-on-one with Dick Cheney is pretty low, probably due to like restraining orders and like bad political lists and stuff. So I don't have to think about how I'm going to engage with Dick Cheney, because it is unlikely to occur. But because I don't know how to engage with Dick Cheney, I am much more likely to opt out of this entire piece of this conversation, because, well, I don't even know how to talk to Dick Cheney. Well, that's true, and not really likely to occur. So you don't have to worry about the big wins, right? I am not going to figure out how to have a conversation with Dick Cheney because it is unlikely to occur. So take those people off. The other side that you have to take off are like your bestie best friends. Your best friend likes you anyway, and you like them anyway. So it doesn't even matter. How hard could it possibly be? They're just going to like you, right? So the easy ones of like, I went to this thing, I have a handout, I'm going to practice. Oh yeah, you did a great job. Who cares? Like, that's not who you need to be practicing with either. Is this clear? But because we're going to talk about how to have a conversation, what happens is we cheat ourselves out of doing what would actually encourage our growth. We cheat ourselves by putting the bar too high or holding the bar too low. So I'm going to invite you to practice with a total stranger that you will never see again. Just practice there. So we're going to metaphorically order a to-go item. So you know the little squawky box when you're in your car and they're like, and then I'm like, venti, soy, chai, no water, no foam. Thank you very much. No, my name's not Karen. That thing, that little squawky box voice, that's who we're going to practice with. Okay. So if you were to download the handout, which I'm going to go through step by step, so don't pressure, you first off are not entitled to a conversation partner. You don't even need another person. Now, in this particular case, if you're talking to someone, I am an external processor, which means I talk to myself all the time. There may be other people present, but they don't need to know that you're doing this thing. And if you were to tell them that you're doing this thing, that might seem strange, handing a stranger a handout. Like, just keep it to yourself. You're just doing your own little personal development situation here, right? You do not need the other person. You do not need another person for your own closure. You do not need another person to practice making connections with humans. You are just going to develop skills that you're going to be responsible for. Okay, so if you are not entitled a partner and you have ruled out the impossible and the too easy, now we are just going to practice. So what you're going to decide is, in a particular conversation, you're going to decide, I'm going to make a better connection. This is what we're going to do. The crazy blue-haired lady, we're going to try it. I'm going to make a better connection. Here we go. Okay. But by saying that, you're showing up in a different way. Your posture is different. Your font is different, because you are actually going to increase the amount of human connection on the planet. Here goes nothing. Number two, how are you going to do this? You are picking a conversation as a tool. In this case, we're going to pick a to-go squawky box conversation, right? Maybe it's a text or an email or an in-person conversation, whatever, but you're going to pick your tool. In this case, what kind of conversation are you picking? So we're going to pick Starbucks. Okay, great. So that's where you're going to pick. Next step, notice you haven't spoken yet. Extroverts, over here, look at this tab. Extroverts, shut up. This is not the time for you to talk yet, because the next step is you're going to have to listen. I know that thing again that your therapist keeps telling you to do. We're going to give it a whirl. We're going to listen to them as if they are wise. Now, we go back to Todd and Barbara's. What is fascinating is that some of you are like, oh no, you don't even know. They might be super dipshit about something, but they are wise about something else. And you don't know what that is because you have kept them in the little box where you're comfortable, and you're going to go have to find out something that they're wise about. What they are at minimum wise about is how they are doing in that given moment. They are very aware of how they are doing in that given moment, and you aren't. So you're going to start with an open door. Does this make sense? You're going to listen to them as if they are wise. So when you pull up to the squawky box, what this means is for me, I am a super sarcastic, funny person. Hopefully you have already discovered that. And depending on what the squawky box says to me, depends on how I engage with them, right? Does the squawky box say, hello, thank you for coming to Starbucks, how can I help you? If I listen to that, I'm going to say they're not very perky. However, if they say, hey, cute little Fiat, of course I drive a Fiat, cute little car, how are you doing today? Can I get you anything exciting today? That I'm listening to them. Now I'm going to make all kinds of judgments and assumptions about what is coming out of the squawky box. That is where you go. You're listening to them as if they are wise, and then you are inserting all of your preparation and safety needed. They're sassy to me. Boom. I am sassy straight back. I can't wait to make the curve. Now, the person who hands me my coffee might not even be the person who was talking to me. That's irrelevant because I am in charge and right about everything. So I am prepared. I feel safe. They're sassy to me. I'm going to be fun and sizzly back. It's going to be great. Unless they're like, and then I'm just going to say, hope you're having a great day. Venti soy chai, no water, no foam. Thank you very much. Right. And move along with your business. Have any of you, especially inside of the sheltering in place thing, have you ever gone to a drive-through? Maybe you're not as extroverted as me, trapped with 3 dogs and an introvert. But sometimes when I go through this is the first human I've talked to, or certainly that haven't paid me to talk to them. I am very excited to talk to them. And I will talk about my favorite sauce, and I want this and extra pickles. I love pickles. Why are pickles so good? Great. And then the person's like, do you want pickles with that? I just gave you a little mini TED talk about the importance of pickles in my life. Why are you asked? Like, they weren't listening. I didn't give them the information in the order that they needed to type it into the cash register. That is a good reminder that I'm not listening. I'm actually just verbally vomiting. I may have just also saved you another marriage therapy copay. I think that's 2 at least. Sometimes you have to shut your face and actually listen to how other people are doing. When you listen to them as if they are wise, then you begin to form your message, because you now have to make judgments and assumptions about how to form your message. You are clear on your intention of the message that you are going to form. So you have your intention and you form your message around it, and then you gift wrap it with all your judgments and assumptions, and you hope it's going to work out. And then, and only then, do you release the Kraken. You then send the text, send the email, say the words outside of your face. You have released the Kraken, and then you hope it works. Hope that works. It might not have worked, so you're going to have to pay attention, because whether it does or it does not, you are responsible. You are responsible for the impact of whatever it is you have sent out into the universe on that human being. 100% responsible. This is not math. Now, why do I say that so confidently? Because if you intentionally formed a message around a clear intention that was informed by your prepared and safe judgments and assumptions, then you know why you said what you said. That doesn't mean that the other person, you're not entitled to it working. You're not entitled to like, oh, yes, that was very clear. Thank you very much for communicating in such a clear, you're not entitled to any of that. So it might have worked. It might not have worked. Now, I am not a parent. You're welcome. But my parenting friends have informed me that there are times where they are attempting to discipline their child and the child responds really happy. And they're like dumbfounded because the child is supposed to feel disciplined, but it didn't work. So it's meaning to be negative, but it somehow lands positive. I have watched my friends who are parents do this weird eyeball Jedi parent out of whack. How do we get into whack? That didn't work. I don't know. And they retreat to the kitchen. So it is possible that it can be incongruent, negative to positive. It is also positive. I think I'm a very funny person. I tell jokes all the time, but some of my jokes don't land well. Right? So then I am responsible if I've offended someone by the words I've chosen or the jokes that I've told or something, I'm responsible for those things. Now, there's a reason why I have said a lot of the things that I've said, but it's not an excuse because now I can be gifted with the feedback, but I'm less defensive because I intentionally was able to form the message that I put out there. And that intention is clear, but that doesn't mean that it's congruent with the impact. There have been many a time, me and you have had conversations where you have been challenged and you've said, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I meant. Okay, do you know what you meant? Because chances are you don't know what you meant and you just found out you said something that meant something else to somebody else, but you didn't know what you meant in the first place. So now you're like, blah, 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 you sound like a gobbly turkey because you just got called out for being unclear of your intention. Now you're clear on your intention, but that doesn't mean that you're not responsible for the previous impact. If occasionally we can slow our roll enough to actually form a message that is clearly intended, then we can be responsible, whether it is congruent or not, in a less defensive manner. Do we do this 100% of the time? No. As a flaming externally processing extrovert, listening for me is like verbal sonar, right? Is that I show up and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like feeding the room and filling out what's happening, even though words are coming out of my face. I am kind of dolphin-like when it comes to the listening, but I also need to like be observing and paying attention and possibly stop the sonar to actually allow someone else to speak. If you need a cliff notes of how to do this to monitor your own behaviors, the next time you bump into somebody virtually or in real life, what would happen if you ask them a question that you don't know the answer to? You should write that down. Ask them a question that you do not know the answer to. So, how's the weather out there? You live there, so you know the answer to that, right? And if you don't live there, you legit don't know what that answer is. What did you have for breakfast today? Is likely something you don't know about everyone. That is a fun question. Leftovers. And the person will be so like, what is even happening? But it's because we never ask questions we don't know the answers to, because we're transactioning. It is a transactional nicety. How is it nice to ask a question that you don't even listen to the answer? You don't need to listen to the answer because you already know the question, right? Can you slow down enough occasionally to have an actual conversation that matters with an actual human being? Could you do that occasionally? If we are responsible for who and how we are when we show up, we're going to have to do that. So that's a good practice. When you then are responsible, then you can pay attention to what was the impact on the relationship. What is our connection standing now? Is it better? Is it neutral? Or is it worse? And then it's a circle and you start over. So I want to leave you today with one example of this, and it's a texting example. So it doesn't even involve actual physical contact. So here's the story. Well, let me tell you one little weird thing first. So I have a thing with flamingos. I just like flamingos. It's nothing weird. I mean, it's weird, but it's not weird, right? So I have a thing with flamingos. So a friend of mine, Sylvie, and I, for no apparent reason, whenever we see a flamingo, we take a picture of it on our cell phone and we text it to each other. Instead of buying it because of plastic and shipping and the environment, we just take a picture of the flamingo thing and then send it. We've been doing this for a very long time. I'm a strange person. Who is surprised by that? Are any of you surprised by this? No, you're not. Okay. So I found a picture of little baby flamingos. So I send a picture to Sylvie of my little baby flamingos. So I get a text back on my cell phone and it says Sylvia, not Sylvie, Sylvia. And the text says, I think you have the wrong number. Okay, first off, thank you for not being mad at me for sending a random stranger, evidently, a picture of flamingos. But number two, Sylvia, I did not know she was still in my cell phone. She is my favorite aunt. You have a favorite aunt by chance? Like super favorite aunt, taught me how to be. And she died a number of years ago in a house fire. So I have not received a text from a Sylvia in quite some time. Didn't even know Sylvia was still in my phone. So I get this text back that says, I think you have the wrong number. And I'm like, ah, Sylvia from the dead. Like, I'm so excited. I'm so elated because Sylvia is such an amazing, like, what? That's even better than baby flamingos. So then I decide, oh, this is one of those moments. Obviously, Sylvia's cell phone number has been recycled, right? So somebody now has this. Okay, great. So I decide I'm going to make a better connection. I'm going to increase the connection on the planet, and I'm going to tell this person how lucky they are that they have my favorite aunt's cell phone number. This is what I'm going to do. I am clear on my intention. I'm going to send a text. That's how I'm going to choose it. I know what my intention is. I'm going to form a message. Okay, what did they say? They didn't say like, yo, what are you doing? They didn't like it snassy. They did reply. They weren't super snarky. It doesn't appear that my number's been blocked or something like that. Okay, great. I'm going to assume they're available for one more text without it being a problem or interrupting, right? Okay, great. So I write the text and that one box, not multiple, because you don't know if it makes noise or somebody's sleeping or something. So one box, and I just simply say, thank you for letting me know. My aunt, Sylvia, used to have this number. She died in a house fire a number of years ago. She is my favorite relative I grew up with ever. And I just want you to know that you are the luckiest person in the whole world to have her cell phone number because she's an incredible person. Have a good day. That's what I said. I send the text. I release the Kraken. Now, this is not the Hallmark Channel, right? So we did not meet. We did not decide to start tapping maple syrup in the forest together or something. I have no idea who this is. I never heard from them again. Relax. They did respond one more time immediately, but then I haven't heard from them since. And the response said, you know, what's interesting is you're not the only person who's told me this. This Sylvia person must have been incredible. I'm honored to have her number. Now, again, not a Hallmark movie, no big splashy thing, no mariachi band came out like, no, 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 like that, nothing happened. But in that moment, I connected with a total stranger. We exchanged something positive and I feel better. Maybe they feel better. I'm a narcissist, so at least I feel better. But like I've increased the connection in the world, right? I then send the baby flamingos to Sylvie and she immediately comes back at me with more flamingos, increase the flamingos in the world. But how cool is it that I could slow down enough in the middle of all that's been going on and just exchange a little pleasantry? If I could do that intentionally in that particular moment, don't you think it's possible that we could do this more regularly? That we could be generous and curious about one another and be able to be vulnerable and authentic with one another. Sometimes it's easier starting with total strangers. But can you have a conversation that matters, knowing that you're going to show up in your own prepared and safe and annoying and frustrating ways that are still capable of doing good? And you're going to connect with the other human being on the other side of the possible conversation that matters. And whatever method it is, texting, email, in person, whatever, it doesn't matter. But without the entitlement of a conversation partner, you are going to do the best you can with what you got some of the time to increase and make better connections, because this individual conversation actually matters. What would happen if you pass somebody and instead of, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? That moment when you like Someone asks how you're doing and you say, pretty good. And they don't say anything back. And you're like, oh, they didn't mean it. They weren't actually asking. It was just niceties. What would happen if you slowed down and meant it the next time you asked somebody how they were doing and didn't mean it? If we can have more conversations that matter, it's not just about recruitment or retention or employee hiring or managing your best friends or dealing with your frenemies or making Todd and Barbara be a different person. It's about navigating a shared space and intentionally deciding to be responsible for increasing the amount of connection that we have. If we can do the best we can with what we've got some of the time, I believe that is good enough now. Being good enough now means that you're occasionally going to have a conversation that matters. Working in education, you have had thousands of conversations that you don't even know mattered. Depending on how long you have been working in this particular field, you get invited to weddings decades later. You don't, I think they were a student of mine. I think I worked with them. I think we did work study together. You find out later on that you made a significant difference to somebody. And what's amazing is that's what a conversation that's built on connection means, is you don't even know you made a difference. You don't know whose life you're saving right now. You don't know what it means to reach out and check in because you're able to see how people are performing online, if they're getting on the portal or they're not getting on the portal, are they turning things in, are they missing appointments? You're able to have a conversation with your coworkers, not just students, about food insecurity or housing instability or what childcare is like right now or what elder care is like right now. We're all dealing with a lot. And most importantly, each one of us individually is dealing with a lot. And we can do the best we can with what we got some of the time by increasing connection with humanity. It's a pretty basic Buddhist principle, but if you're feeling isolated or lonely or anxious or uncertain or unknown, the way to improve that is to encourage other people to feel connected, together, seen, heard, valid. When you make space for other people, it in turn gifts you back with a space where you belong, where you can engage with a conversation that matters. That matters. You matter and your work matters. Maybe now more than ever, but to be honest, it really kind of just always matters. Being good enough now is about doing the best you can with what you got some of the time. Now, if I've done my job today, I hopefully have been thought-provoking, but sometimes those thoughts kind of marinate for a while and they take a minute. So I want to encourage you again to write down that texting number. And if there's something that I can do later, or those of you watching the recording that I can do later, I'm here for you, because literally I wrote a book about it and I want to stay connected, and conversations really do truly matter. And for some people, I'm the total stranger that you might actually feel like you can connect with. So the number again is 202-670-4262. And if there's anything I can ever do to help, please let me know. Thank you very much for letting me open SkillFest 2021. To do the best you can with what you got some of the time. That is a conversation that matters. So thank you very much. This is good. It's good for energy stuffs. I believe the next up is that you have like a little teeny tiny break, about 20-minute break. So get a snack, refill your beverage, go to the bathroom. Here's a strange thing to say in a Zoom context. Go outside. I don't know if you know this, but spring is sprung. The grass is riz. There is a very good possibility you got some flowers out there. Go look at something. Come on back. Pick your next Zoom session. The next sessions or the next workshops start at 10:30.
Thank you, Jess.
Oh, more than welcome.
Thank you so much.
Woo-woo.
Bye. Thank you so much. Have a good day.